Well, guys, this is kind of the end of the road. Well, not the end of the beginning of the road, rather. And we're gonna finish up talking about the basics of DMing your first adventure, campaign, and so forth. We hope that this tips have been helpful to you, and well, we'll keep on going.
Yeah. I'm Eugene,
I'm Eddie.
and today we're going to talk a bit about, like Eddie mentioned, how to get player feedback. And I think a couple of things that we haven't mentioned that I'd like to talk about today is how to keep your player characters in character, how to identify when they're out of character, metagaming, which I think is really important to try to control at the gaming table. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about player feedback, their expectations, and how to keep them motivated and yourself motivated, because DMing can be tiring. Sometimes it feels like it's unrewarded. So we got to keep ourselves in the groove to keep it going.
We have to talk about two scenarios. We briefly mentioned it, but we're going to try to go a bit deeper about that, which is in the session when the things that are being said are said by the character themselves, or when they're said by the player, speaking from their point of view outside of being the character. It's a little bit confusing, so I don't know, maybe Eugene, you can go a little bit deeper on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways of talking about in character. Like you mentioned, when I'm speaking as my character, I don't know, Hagrath the Barbarian or Floriponcio the Paladin, then you have to speak from what they know, their knowledge, their experiences. This kind of mixes with the part of metagaming. What is metagaming? And then we'll go back a little bit into the other stuff.
Well, metagaming is speaking from outside the game. Like the term meta means that, I don't know if you had etymologies in your school, but that's the meaning of meta, outside of. And it's when you try to solve the game, you try to solve the game as a puzzle, but kind of breaking the spirit a little bit. Because Dungeons & Dragons, at the end of the game, it has a lot of mechanics that can be seen that way, and you can try to fight them like that, or something even more egregious, like, for instance, if you're running a pre-made adventure, maybe one of the players read it and knows what they're supposed to happen, and even they confront you if you change something. This is your prerogative as a DM. You can change anything you want, and they get a little bit mad about that. They're metagaming. They're trying to beat the system and win, but role-playing games are not about winning. They're more about the experience.
Well, but even with more experienced players, if I've been playing D&D or role-playing games for 20 years, maybe a little bit more, there's certain things that I've learned throughout the years. I mean, it maybe even be cliche things, like you need fire to kill a troll, you need to stab a vampire in the heart, or pop culture knowledge even, like the silver bullet for the werewolf and stuff like that. But you have to try to keep in character. Like, why would my level 1 warrior that just left the military and is looking to make a name for himself adventuring and money outside of the military, how would I know that? I mean, unless like the lore around where my character is involved with that kind of stuff or that kind of knowledge, he'd have no way of knowing, or she'd have no way of knowing, right? So how would you stop a player from trying to metagame or pulling in information or breaking character immersion?
Well, that's pretty complicated, but it's sort of the things that you also talk about on your session 0, like how much of this is allowed, how little of this is allowed. It's something that you can also talk after the session, like you can say to the player, well, hey, dude, you sort of what you were doing, you weren't supposed to know that because you're like a farmer that just knows their village, and you made some assumptions about the nobility that you weren't even remotely supposed to know. So try to play between the boundaries of what your character actually knows, which is a little bit difficult because a lot of the time, for instance, let's say you're a really shy, awkward person, and the character they made is like this super suave and charismatic swashbuckler. Well, they cannot really actually act like that character, but their character is different from them. So you have to distinguish those boundaries of difference. I mean, psychologically, how would you describe this? Because, I mean, that's your actual expertise, so...
Describe what? A player playing something that he's not in everyday life?
Exactly.
I think that's the whole point of role-playing sometimes. It's to learn different aspects about yourself as a person via the player character. But I think that's a little... Yeah, I think let's say, this introvert wanting to be the debonair, bard, swashbuckler, trying to get into even the dragon's pants, that kind of a player. So it's okay that they can't maybe act out that whole extrovert part, but you do have to kind of prod them in a certain way to get them into the character that they're trying to play.
Yeah, even if their descriptions are not as good, you can, as a DM, react like they're actually the character, and you're like, oh yeah, the world reacts accordingly to what your character is, not to how you're actually playing it. So,
but now as a DM, there's also a duty to have them be able to find out what's going on. Like we mentioned in the previous episode, there's a part where your player characters are going to have to investigate. Now, if you know that they're going to be confronting an enemy with a certain resistance or certain properties or, I don't know, whatever, qualities that are specific to that monster or enemy or villain, you have to give them the opportunity to find that. Maybe it's rumors, maybe it's the drunk guy who saw something one night in the tavern and nobody believes him, but he knows that the creature only turns into a werewolf in the full moon and nothing hurts him but silver. I don't know.
Or even if you do something odd, like trolls that are immune to fire and actually get damaged by, I don't know, oak.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
That would be interesting. And you have to set up the legend. Oh yeah, most trolls are like this, but the trolls of this region are different.
So give them the opportunity to find out so they wouldn't have to metagame or they couldn't metagame.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, but you have to be, yeah, it's quite the balancing act, and you have to work on that.
Now, there is another aspect to being out of character that doesn't precisely have to do with the player characters themselves, but it has to do more with the social aspect of the game. Now, remember, we're getting together maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks, and if you're playing with friends, you're going to have a lot of common stuff, interest, and people that you know and things that you've done. So when it comes to sitting down at the table and starting the game, it's really easy to get lost in these conversations and trivialities and stuff that aren't related to the games. And that happens not only at the beginning when we're snacking and eating and getting in touch, but it can also happen during the game itself. At any point in time, I can turn around and maybe give an inside joke. It's not a bad thing per se, but it's something that can really break the immersion. And if you have a watcher or you have an introverted player who's just starting to get into it, and all he's hearing is Jim and Joe joking about Nancy, it's going to break the immersion for your friend.
Yeah, you have to put it all back on track. I mean, it's part of the game. Banter is great. It means that the people that are bantering are having fun, but be aware, perhaps somebody is being left out, and try to set everything back on track. You're kind of the leader in that way.
Well, we're coming toward the end of the episode, and something I'd like to talk about, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Eddie. As a dungeon master, when dealing with your players, being a dungeon master is kind of stressful in and of itself. You're putting a lot of expectations on yourself that maybe even the players aren't putting on you. Maybe. Depends on how demanding
I'm
you are.
irresponsible, man. But yes, I understand knowing you. Yeah, you are doing that. I'm very responsible and I'm very relaxed. But still, I feel that, yes.
Well, DMs have varying levels of neurosis.
Yes.
So I think something that's really important, especially for starting dungeon masters, game masters, is getting player feedback. Talking to them post-session, asking how they felt, what they thought, how the game went, like the flow of the adventures, the timing, the activities during the game. All that's important that you can talk to your players after each session, or every other maybe couple sessions, depending on how much of a response you would need from them, or to figure out how they're feeling, and that in turn can help you modify or change or adapt or keep things the way they are if they're happy. I know that personal experience, some of the best feelings I have gotten after a session isn't even really talking to my players, it's hearing them talk.
Between each other, yes. Yeah. It's great, yeah.
When you can hear them planning and making a strategy or just reminiscing or talking shit about something that happened, and it's awesome.
Great. Yeah, agreed, completely agreed. And you can be as systematic or as casual as you want as that. As you can probably surmise, I'm very casual myself. But stuff like a WhatsApp group or whatever, whichever sort of group you choose to make, and maybe between sessions, send each other messages, or you ask privately, hey, on email, send them an email, hey, how you doing? How do you feel about this, about that? Or even at the end of the session, perhaps you can tell them, oh, we're gonna do this thing that's gonna be out of the table. Perhaps, I don't know, there's gonna be a couple of months between what happens in this session and the next sessions. What will your character do? You drop me a line, and how would you feel about doing such and such? And that's part of the feedback. How invested are the players on this sort of things? And yeah, keep the channels of communication open.
Yeah, don't. I think we mentioned this before. You're going to make mistakes. It's important to talk about those things at these points between sessions.
Yes.
Maybe you had in the session 0, you talked about some things, and things were a lot different than what you thought they would be, or maybe things that you didn't expect to happen. You can talk about these between the sessions as well. It's important to, like Eddie says, always keep an open channel of communication. Always be open to getting feedback, be it positive or negative, from your players. Because at the end of the day, I think that helps us grow. It helps us learn and helps us to adapt and be more adept at dealing with players.
Yeah, and remember, even positive feedback can help you grow. I mean, perhaps a player really liked the funny character voice you made. Oh, well, I'll add a little bit more of funny character voices rather than just never you doing that and then that. Or, oh, I really love this odd combat situation you put us in. Okay, I'll try to innovate with a little bit more combat, more different flavored combat. Stuff like that. So yeah, keep a head up and to enjoy the experience. At the end of the day, you also have to enjoy us at the end.
Yeah, that's very important. Well, I think this ends our mini-series on DMing basics. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a message, leave a question, like, subscribe. We'll see you in the next episode.
And rage
responsibly.
Roll the dice!